boardroom. This is the business of esports. The worlds of gaming and esports are evolving every day faster than ever before. With YouGov's living data, you can probe into the real thoughts and behaviors of esports fans and gamers worldwide. If you're a team, a brand, an agency, or a rights holder, you should be talking with YouGov. They're partners with the biggest names in esports and the biggest brands all around the world, driving compelling results every single day. Check out yougov.com/BOE and schedule a call with YouGov today. From the keyboard to the boardroom, this is the Business of Esports weekly news show / post podcast live stream. I am Paul the Prophet Dawalibi. I'm joined today by my friends and co-hosts, the Honorable Judge Jimmy Baratta, Jeff the Juice Cohen, and Ben the Data Paro. I love that we're making this stick, Ben. For those of you who are new here, welcome. What we do is we cover the most pressing gaming and esports topics and news of the week. But we look at all of it through a business and C-suite lens. We dissect, we analyze the business implications of everything happening in this industry. And best of all, with this live stream, we get to do it live with you guys, which makes it so much more fun. So we encourage you to get in our faces, to ask questions, challenge us, bring a friend, bring a colleague. If you're listening to this after the fact, it's so much more fun to be here live. And we appreciate all of you who are here live. How you guys doing this week? Ben, how you doing?
Doing well, man. Yeah, things are good. Just got back from a couple weeks of travel. Was at the Esports Business Summit. Was at GamesBeat in California the week before that. Feeling smarter than ever after those trips, but a little bit more tired.
How was it? My issue with these trips is always you're swamped with opportunity afterwards, right? If the conference is good.
You're right, and you're swamped with all the emails you missed because you were scouting other opportunities. So I've just kind of dug myself out of that load. It was great. I think a lot of the conversation, especially at GamesBeat, I don't know if you've been to that event before, but it's in the Bay Area. It's a lot of venture capital, a lot of lofty ideas, so a lot of metaverse and future of gaming conversations. They had the author of Snow Crash there. Steve Stevenson.
Yeah, Neil Stevenson.
And Neil Stevenson, thank you. That was just like a good, mental stimulation session. I think, overall really good. Esports Business Summit, a blast as always. A lot of this, recurring faces, but those are my favorite faces in the industry. So good to see people and have some fun, and it's been a good time.
Cool. Jeff, we missed you last week.
Yeah, I finally feel like I have a working piece of hardware. So, I apologize for last week having some technical difficulties, but I think I fixed it. So I was sad to have missed last week and also to have missed those two conferences. Those are two actually of my favorite conferences. I think I went to GamesBeat back in 2019. And then Esports Business Summit have been a couple times. That's actually a really good one, I think.
Yeah, missed you guys there. I know it's usually when we get together in person.
Well, you guys missed all the conferences here. So, I mean, where were you guys for the Dubai Esports Festival, right?
You're right.
I would have loved to go if I had a expense-paid ticket.
Wink, wink, nudge, nudge.
Emirates first class, right? The only way to go.
It's the only way.
Jeff, I was a bit sad because last week there was good discussion around public company stuff, which you missed, unfortunately. But we do have lots of news to get through this week and some good stories. And I want to start with something that's mostly because it will make for a good clickbaity title for this episode, which is why I'm putting this story first. But this is, I'm sure all of you have been watching the FTX meltdown over the last week. It's been everywhere. And I feel like we need to get in on this action at least a little bit here. And I saw two stories related to this, basically the same story with two different angles here. And the headline was TSM releases statement as major sponsor FTX files for bankruptcy. So TSM released a statement. This is after, for those who don't know the background, they signed a deal with FTX, $210 million deal to essentially change the name of the team and brand everything TSM FTX. If you remember that sort of alphabet soup. Now, with FTX going bankrupt, TSM put out a statement saying, along with the rest of the world, TSM has been closely following the situation surrounding FTX. We have no insight into the matter other than what has been reported publicly. We're currently consulting legal counsel to determine the best next steps to protect our team, staff, fans, and players. It says, to be clear, TSM is built on a solid foundation. We're stable and profitable, and we continue to forecast profitability for this year, next year, and beyond. We look forward to a great year in 2023. I'm curious what you guys think of the statement, obviously, and what, you know, there's probably a legal sort of rabbit hole I don't necessarily want to go down here, but you know, these teams, I don't know how this deal was structured. I can't remember if it was all up front or if it was sort of spread out over years. But if they do find out that FTX, you know, sort of this was fraud, that you know, they were basically stealing and playing with clients' money, do you think there's any obligation here for TSM to have to give the money back, to like claw it back or something like that? Because this was a, you know, a sponsorship. I'm curious your take on this. Jeff, maybe
that last part's super interesting. I hadn't even thought of that. I thought you were going to go the opposite direction and say like whether they would have a claim, you know, to FTX that would have to still pay them the money. And I guess I was going to say like there is no money. It seems like it's all gone. But yeah, no, I hadn't thought that maybe they would actually be liable to pay that back. Clearly, Jimmy maybe would have the last word on that from a legal perspective. But I think, you know, my thought here, one, I'm surprised they said they're profitable. That, you know, that came as a bit of a surprise to me, pleasant surprise. So that was notable in the statement. And then I think just overall, it's easy to say this in hindsight, but I think a lot of us were saying this even at the time. This is kind of exactly why you don't change your team name to be a brand sponsor.
Right.
Now, clearly, none of us were like, oh, well, FTX is a complete fraud. This is going to turn out to be a disaster. If we had, we'd be billionaires right now and have made a lot of money. But it just shows the perils of literally changing your name to be a corporate sponsor's name. Like, don't do that. It's a bad idea.
Really good point. Were any of you else surprised at the profitable statement? Because the insinuation, at least the way I read it, is we're stable and profitable. I'll add words here, without the $210 million from FTX, right? Which is assuming top line revenue for them, that's sponsorship. Does that surprise anyone?
I mean, I'd be curious to know kind of how that was supposed to be paid out. Like, I'm sure that their books for over the next 3 to 5 years, I had no idea, look a lot different today than they did, you know, a month ago. And yeah, put some pressure on TSM to find other sponsors to fill that hole.
That's a big hole to fill, right? Like if they made plans, like they're budgeting with $210 extra million for an esport, you know, and most of these esports teams run, even if they are profitable, really on the limit, right? Like they're not, none of them are spinning off tons of free cash flow. You know, that's a big hole to fill. I don't know. It's a little bit of posturing maybe in the statement. Like
arguably unfillable too, because like the crypto was really like, they were kind of the guy, and maybe there's other areas that esports can turn to. But when I say that, it's not to be bearish about the whole space. It's more like crypto had just become such a behemoth of an advertiser. Like there is no like other substitute where it's like, oh, let's just find another $250 million title sponsor. Like I'm not sure those just grow on trees. Like they might be able to find a few, you know, $1 million here or there. Like I have no doubt that I'm still very bullish on general.
I mean, TSM's also a smart organization. Any of these crypto deals have to be weighed with this concern and consideration in mind. So I don't know. There must have been maybe some contingencies or fail safes. I hope that they've thought about this.
Maybe they got paid in tokens.
I mean, that's the other thing too. Like, was this the $210 million when the deal was signed? But if it was in crypto, what is that worth now?
FTT or whatever.
Yeah, that they all had on FTX's exchange, right? So, Jimmy, we'll give you sort of the final thought on this. Is there a risk that the money gets clawed back? if there's a criminal sort of charges.
This is a story where I wish we had a real lawyer on the show, Paul. I miss all of our lawyer friends, and I'm definitely going to see some of them soon at these conferences, so we can get those hot takes here. Because as far as the criminal proceedings and the debt proceedings and how that collection occurs, that's something that I would, that I probably wouldn't share my own opinion here on whether or not the money that TSM has from FTX can be taken away from them. That seems a little extreme to me. Because then how do you account for that?
Drug dealer, right? If I'm a drug dealer and I come and I hand you $100 million to sponsor, something you're doing, and then I go to jail for dealing drugs, can they not claw because the $100 million is essentially proceeds from crime?
I've never dealt with that specific. This is such a complex issue, and it was funny. I was speaking with my neighbor about it this morning while we were walking our dogs. And I also feel like when the criminal proceeding occurs, this is going to be very similar to Enron in that you're not even going to have a typical jury of random common people of common sensibility. You're going to have people that have, CFPs or higher financial degrees and certifications and understandings, because the complexity of what was done, as well as what can be, these questions are relatively simple, but I think when you get into really what happened and what the recourse is, I think it's a little bit more complicated than we're all making it out to be. So my simple thing here is obviously terrible. I don't know what recourse any debtor has right now to claim money that's been already transferred to a third party, or what authority the government has to freeze those assets, recall them back. That just seems a little overreaching to me. Yeah. I get the logic, but having not gone through that personally, I would, we'll punt this one till we get our friends at Greenberg Traurig or any other firms that we've worked with in the past on the show, because we would love to hear their insight on that.
It just seems like it would be tough, because then where do you draw the line? Like, do employees, let's say I worked at FTX and I got paid a salary and I have nothing to do with this fraud. Like, are they going to say, well, you made $300,000 over the last couple of years, like, give us the money back? Like, they paid it to you. I just don't think there has to be a line drawn somewhere, provided they didn't participate in the fraud or whatever.
What I like about this story, or what's interesting to me about this story, is kind of TSM in hot water again. They were just kind of the dust was finally settling, I think, from that Andy Dinh story. They were kind of flying under the radar. They were keeping their heads, I think, above water, just doing what they do. We've known for a long time TSM has been one of the more profitable orgs. I think from the very beginning, when Forbes started tracking this, 2018-ish, 2017, TSM was surprising because all these orgs were burning money and they were trying to turn a profit. And TSM, surprisingly, even though it's probably slim margins, was actually doing quite well. The fact that the press statement focused so heavily on that, to me, read a little tone deaf, I think. I would have done something more, I don't know, just like, we're really sorry to all those affected. Crypto, I don't know. This is just, a lot of people lost a lot, right? And here you're just saying, we're fine, we're healthy, we're financially viable, as opposed to, hey, this was a terrible partner. We were duped like everyone else. We're investigating further and we're ceasing relation. I would have left it at that. I also would have put the statement out probably 2 days ago or 3 days. I thought it was a little late too.
Jimmy, that last point's a great point. And like digging deeper into the meta, and I didn't read the full statement, so maybe they did allude to this, but like, if you think about why did they change their name to TSM FTX? It was to get their fans to put money on FTX. So like, if it worked, their fans got screwed. So I think you make a great point where like, they have to acknowledge a little bit like, hey, to our fans,
to be fair, through no fault of their own, right?
100%, Paul. And I'm not saying they are like criminally liable or at fault, but like, if you took a sponsor to the Business of Esports and all of a sudden it was like, hey, everyone who watches this live stream and all of our fans and our friends put their money in and lost it all, you might not be criminally liable, but you'd be like, yeah, that's not good.
You'd be apologetic.
I'm sorry,
right?
guys. Like, I think
if we find Ben is stealing candy from babies, we'd have to apologize on the
like,
show.
it just
Right.
seems like the right thing
Right.
to do.
Or you send all these people to me, your listeners to YouGov to run market research, and then we just walk out the door with their money. You probably get a phone call.
You'd be apologetic, more apologetic, I feel. I think that's a good point.
Exactly.
Let me just get caught up on comments here. There's a lot. Matt says the data is great. Yeah, I love it. Kristen says Jeff has passed off the tech issues to Jimmy. Hello, everyone.
Hopefully I fix them.
Neil says, I heard a rumor that Holodeck Ventures is taking over the FTX sponsorship with Dio. No, we are not. That's Neil, love to have you here. We are not taking over that sponsorship. Plus, TSM Business of Esports doesn't nearly roll off the tongue in the same way.
TSM BOE.
Yeah, TSM BOE. There you go. Matt says, this is one of the few sponsorships I thought was immune to failure when it was first announced. The partnership between crypto and gaming makes too much sense. I mean, the overlap in audiences, and we've seen the data from YouGov, right? I think you guys had produced the report that said 56% of gamers would give up their traditional bank account for a crypto wallet. So, no question that there is value in terms of the overlap. But, I mean, again, no one could have predicted fraud and, the kind of behavior that took place here.
I will say, sorry, Coach Jeff. Looking at, so we started tracking esports teams as brands within our daily brand tracking tool called Brand Index, and I'm pulling it up in the background here. So far, and it's a bit early maybe to tell. I mean, although there's a small spike in what we call negative buzz. This is around TSM, not FTX. So negative buzz, things people have heard something bad about TSM in the last few weeks. It's probably a little bit early to tell us if that's it's not a significant jump yet. So we'll see. I'll be keeping an eye on it.
And it's interesting to see how quickly that shows up, right? Because we're only 3 days out from at least the TSM story, right?
Yeah.
I think that's we talk about it all the time on the show, the sort of the living nature of the data and how it's constantly being updated. Allows us to at least comment on these things. Christian says, I feel like this is another episode in the crypto industry's lack of care for the gaming community. I mean, Christian, I agree. I sort of agree. Again, it was this is maybe I'm the first guy to criticize how crypto has approached gaming, but this is one of those situations where it's it's the 1 in a billion kind of fraud, criminal type of activity. Hardware Barbecue says, I'm surprised not a lot of people made an NVIDIA RTX joke with FTX. Hardware Barbecue, you made it. This is what's important. Matt says, in the past, I would have said gaming companies can rely on crypto companies for sponsorships, but now with a failure this big, I'm no longer sure crypto is a good companion for gaming. I guess the question, guys, do you think that's from a pure sponsorship? Should gaming companies be a bit more wary of crypto sponsors now? Or do we think this has delayed sort of the coming together of gaming and crypto in a significant way?
I mean, I think all properties are less bullish on crypto sponsorships than they were 6, 8, 12 months ago. Just the way things have turned. And I would also argue that I don't know that crypto ever had the best intentions for gamers in mind. They just saw significant overlap and interest in the gaming audience to what they're selling. So I would push back if there was any kind of altruistic feelings from these sponsors when they were getting into the space. It's really just about their bottom line.
Not just sponsors, but let's talk about gaming companies that are developing blockchain-based games, right? With digital assets and
different thing, but
different thing completely. But I'm just piggybacking off the conversation of, is the gaming community as a whole more wary of this technology, of this money, and of these companies as a whole? I think we're in the same position that we were in around March when NFTs took a sharp drop, and it's the same, right? It's these technologies, this whole industry needs to kind of put up or shut up. And, I think the hype investment now is done, but it's been over for a while. And it's more, what can we do with this? Is this sustainable? And what's being created? And is this something people want to double down on? And so I think if you're a blockchain-based gaming company, or if you're a company that took crypto sponsorship in the past, right, you still need to prove whatever you're doing, show that there's an audience, show that there's a market for it. Luckily, all those people, unless it was FTX's money, still have that money in their accounts, right? It's worth something. It's not a coin that went to zero. And they really need to innovate off of that. And if they can't over the next few months, I think that will be more telling than anything, right? On whether or not there's a future here, or whether or not the gaming community will continue to support it. So I totally agree with you, Ben. I saw a parallel, and I wanted to kind of lean into that other vertical as well, because I think
there's
go for it.
A lot of people probably in the gaming community that are patting themselves on the back and kind of say, "Oh, I was right all along. I told you so." I'm not sure if that's necessarily the one. It's probably not the right attitude to have. Number one, if people are hurting and have lost money. So, if you're one of those people, I would just tamp down the rhetoric, because it's just not probably productive. But yeah, to your point, I think now these gaming companies that pivoted all in on blockchain gaming have a lot to prove. And it's kind of what we've said on this podcast from day one. You have to prove why being a blockchain game is any better, because this whole idea that we're just going to create fake coins and trade them around, and everyone's going to get rich by you buy the coin, then someone else buys the coin, and this whole like FOMO Ponzi-nomics obviously doesn't work. It didn't work a year ago. It certainly didn't work 6 months ago. And now like it's kind of like the mask is being pulled off. So we'll see what the next 6 months, a year brings, because to your point, Jimmy, there is a lot of companies with a lot of great developers that have pivoted to this. And some of them are going to build great games. So I'm still interested to see what happens here. I wouldn't say that, I think it's dead in terms of the potential of blockchain gaming.
Guys, I just want to get caught up. Lots of comments here. Sorry, I read that one. Christian says, the fact that TSM is still growing, even with all these bumps, is very reassuring for the org's success. Yeah, I mean, TSM has always been, top, if not like top of the heap in terms of esports orgs. I don't think that's surprising. Stuart says, surely given the size of the sponsorship, someone within TSM smelt something funny. I mean, Stuart, you would think, but Temasek, Sequoia, Ontario Teachers, like the list of very sophisticated investors who were all fooled by this. Never mind all the crypto hedge funds, never mind, like you name it, right? All the people who either transacted on FTX, invested in FTX, and none of them blew the whistle on it. Hard to blame TSM at all. I doubt anyone at TSM knew anything at all, smelled anything at all. It was just hidden, I think, very well. Hardware Barbecue says, I think TSM will be fine. On the bright side, at least, they didn't sign up with some offshore gambling website that swindles people. Cough, steak, cough. Yeah, I mean, the gambling world has seen its own share of struggles also, Hardware Barbecue, no question. But, whether we like gambling or not, at least those seem to be legitimate businesses, at least at face value, whether you think, gambling is good or not. This was a case of fraud. Hardware Barbecue says also, crypto and gaming makes too much sense, but so far there hasn't been success yet, like a certain unicorn venture. There's obviously a lot of work needed when it comes to regulation and investor protection. We'll just have to wait and watch. Yeah, and I think we've all said this, like not to sort of repeat or rehash, but it's really the crypto world has struggled to identify the benefits. So at face value, it seems like it should go together. But the reason there hasn't been a success is because no one has convinced gamers why this is better. I think that's fundamentally the challenge still. Stuart says, I just don't see how this was ever ROI positive without bringing into question the amount of the sponsorship. Stuart, ROI positive for who? For FTX or for TSM? Because for TSM, it was clearly ROI positive.
Unless it burns their brand reputation and they lose fans over it long term.
Well, now,
That's
of
true.
course,
That's true.
I think we're talking about when it started. I do remember we had a pretty substantial debate over who benefited more. I feel like I think the obvious answer was TSM. That's probably where we landed. But we did feel, and I think it was probably armed with some YouGov data, just that there was a great overlap here. So we did, Paul, I know you mentioned that stat many times about I'm going to butcher it, so maybe you can remind me, but the number of people in that cohort that would give up a bank account, which I thought was a ludicrous number, but pretty telling.
High number. And let's not forget, there's Team Liquid and Coinbase have their partnership. There's others out there. I think, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Like this one went really sour in a very big way for FTX. Well, I think TSM will be fine. Although I'm sure there's a lot of head scratching and headaches they're working through right now. Trying to find
it's weird. It's a weird situation, right? Because there's not many parallels. It's not like Bernie Madoff was sponsoring like the New York Jets.
Literally Enron Field. I think like the Houston Astros had their field was Enron Field.
Okay.
I have no idea what happened with it, but that would be actually a pretty good parallel. I have no clue. Jimmy, that maybe you could dig into the case law here and see if Enron they end up paying that back.
I wonder how they're feeling about the crypto.com arena.
I saw a picture where they were like getting rid of that, or no, maybe it was the FTX because that's Miami.
In Miami. I think they were removing it already.
They're already removing it. And I think Mercedes F1 took it off of their cars already.
Yeah.
That's what I said. I think the TSM announcement was a little delayed because any other person that I saw in partnership with FTX had already pulled this by Friday. So it was just a little strange to me to see this on Wednesday or was it yesterday? But yeah.
Hardware Barbecue says, I still feel taking crypto is a lot better than taking gambling sponsorship as long as they do things by the book and no FTX like shenanigans, which eventually comes out. As of now, we'll just have to wait for the scammy companies to either implode or burn out. Hardware Barbecue, I think anecdotally, and this would be an interesting sort of YouGov study, is anecdotally, I feel like there's no question more overlap between crypto and gaming than gambling and gaming, I would think.
Give me 5 minutes and I'll pull something up.
I love it.
Because that would be
I
interesting, right? Like, what is the bigger overlap?
That would be pretty cool if you could pull that up.
Yeah.
In real time. I think to his point, does anyone disagree with his point? I think obviously in this case, it ends up being that the company is like a fraud, but I don't think anyone's like, hey, sports teams shouldn't take sponsorships from like power and utility companies because Enron was a fraud. Damn, those power and utility companies, just like the worst people out there. It just happened to be a fraud. So yeah, I think I agree. Taking a gambling sponsorship is still a bit less ESG friendly maybe than crypto for sure. So I agree.
All right. So I'm going to read the last two comments and then you guys will have to stick around. Stay tuned for the answer on where's the bigger overlap. Christian says, I would really like traditional sports teams to start sponsoring their region's orgs more now. Christian, what do you mean?
I saw that. So yeah, I actually wanted to tease that comment too. I think that it's a challenge, Christian, because there are some of those orgs that will actually own their local Overwatch League team, or and then there's other Call of Duty and League of Legends teams that are trying to build themselves around a certain DMA or city area. But I think that at the end of the day, traditional sports like esports is built on sponsorship sales. So I don't know there's benefit to them to spend money to sponsor an esports team, whether it's affiliated to their local area or not, to kind of grow their brand. I don't think so.
Agreed. Sorry. Unless they were going to buy the team, own the team, I just don't see why they would send their fans to a compete. That's like saying why does a McDonald's sponsor Wendy's?
Or maybe it's more why does McDonald's sponsor Jamba Juice? But because they're different sectors within food and bev, but they are competing for dollars at the end of the day.
So that is a better analogy than
Ardor Barbecue says, it's hard to smell something funny when everything is fine on paper. Whatever happened behind the books and under the table. Yeah, and they were showing papers that all seemed fine, right? Again, it was not kosher. Is Qatar sponsoring an esports team? Considering the amount they're putting in everywhere in and around FIFA, I wonder if this is something they'll like to get into. Almost all of the countries here in the region, whether it's Bahrain or Qatar or the UAE or Saudi, they're all starting to think, if not already having invested in gaming and esports in general. I don't think Qatar as a state, I should say, as a country, has sponsored an esports team, not to my knowledge. I don't think so. But it's more likely that they'll do it through like essentially what is a state-owned company, like the same way you see Emirates here. Emirates Airways sponsor soccer teams, for example. But like Emirates Airways is owned by the state. And I think that's more likely what you'll see. Jimmy,
Emirates, sponsor me. I will say nothing but great things about Emirates.
Metal says, do you think Africa will be part of the esports Olympics, and what games do you think will be played? This is a tangent, but we were changing topics anyways, Metal, so I'm curious what you guys think. Do we think Africa will be part of the esports Olympics, and what games do you think will be played? I mean, Africa is an important part of the ecosystem, no question. Big mobile penetration there. Definitely a ton of potential in the region. In terms of esports Olympics, that we don't even know if esports will be at the Olympics yet. That really hasn't been decided. They're going to test supposedly some games ahead of the Olympics as a test, and it will not be anything violent. So, there won't be any Counter-Strike. There won't be any.
By violent, do you mean like realistic violent, Paul? Like you just mentioned Counter-Strike, because you can make the argument that Smash is violent, right? So it's kind of a joke to me that's I get why that's a concern for them, but that's kind of a joke to me.
If I'm a betting man, it's League, it's League of Legends, it's Rocket League. It's these kinds of titles.
I agree with you, though.
Titles, right? Sports titles will probably be the first to be tested. So NBA and NBA, NHL. FIFA, the sports titles will be the first, I think, to be tried if they are tried officially. And I think, again, we had covered a story where they were saying they were going to do a 2-week or 1-week thing ahead of the Olympics around esports as a test, and it was going to be the sports-based games.
I could see Rocket League doing very well as some type of Street Fighter or Mortal Kombat.
They won't go there though.
Fighting game. You don't think a fighting game? I mean, they have boxing in the Olympics, right? So that's where it gets a little gray water, I think, or gray area. Yeah,
I don't think esports should be at the Olympics in the first place. That's just my,
your hot take.
Well, it's not, I've said it before. I think Olympics are so boring. Like, why would we want to associate with such a boring brand? Antonio says they love FIFA in Africa. Yeah, also in the Middle East, Antonio. It's a huge market for FIFA. No question.
All right, guys, can I have some stats. Is it possible for me to share my screen? Do this real time. I have a present button.
That's dangerous.
I don't want to break the system here.
Yeah, try.
Bring up some other windows. Who knows what you got going on?
Let's try.
This is live. This is how things go haywire.
This is how things go haywire.
All right, here we go. So,
did it work? Yeah, it did work.
All right, cool. So, welcome to the YouGov Profiles platform.
Can you make this bigger, Ben?
Yeah, definitely. Whoops.
Yeah, there we go.
Better. So, what I'm looking at here are 18 to 44-year-olds who say that they are somewhat interested, or esports is one of their top interests. We call that the top 2 box. So, I've eliminated people who say that they're a little bit interested or not at all interested in esports. Okay. We've just found, like, when we're looking at this audience, focusing on the top 2 boxes is more telling of who they really are. And then we're comparing this to the general population, 18 to 44-year-old. And, basically the bottom line here is there's kind of a similar amount of interest. And I bet if we manipulated this one step further, we'd see that these 2 audiences are highly correlated. So about 55% of the esports audience say that they'd be willing to give up their bank account to use cryptocurrency instead. Another 68% agree to the statement that cryptocurrencies are the future of online financial transactions. And then 68% again say they really enjoy betting and gambling. So it's like
it's really
dead heat.
That's
dead
wild.
Heat, yeah. But now,
Ben, what's the number next to the 21, 50, 670?
That's the number of people that meet our target audience that have answered this particular question. Yeah.
Cool.
So the betting one is a smaller sample.
It's a smaller sample.
But still statistically
probably a newer question. I took one statement around gambling. There's a lot of other ways we could look at gambling. But
and what is Z-score, Ben? Just so we understand, because I noticed that was different between the crypto and the betting one.
Yeah. So Z-score is a significance, a SIG test data point. Basically, anything that's plus or minus 2 tells us it's a statistically significant difference, which these all are, between our target and our base audience. Now, if I zoom out again, or for some reason I'm missing, I don't know why, I'm missing the index column, which I think is actually my favorite stat. Let's see if I just try flipping some things around. Usually there's 2 more columns here to the left that would tell me kind of how much this group over indexes to the base audience. But just looking at the stats, I mean, this is basically an over index of around like 150, because they're like 1.5 times more likely to agree to the statement than the base audience. It's 670 versus 40. Same here. And then this is like an index of at least 200, because they're at least 2 times more likely to agree to the statement than the base audience. Ben,
out of curiosity, this is US data, right?
Yeah. I'm in the US profiles data set. This was updated as recent as November 6th and represents a 52-week period back from that.
Does it change globally, or?
Yeah, we have this similar data set in 55 other markets. And then we also have specific to like fan profiles. We have a global database that's really only about like sponsorship, and it's more of a market sizing tool than a profiling tool, which you have to do market by market.
But if people are interested in the global data, you got to reach out to YouGov. There you go. I love that. What it proves, and I think the answer finally to the question then is both crypto companies and gambling companies should be advertising to esports fans, right? Like that is the conclusion.
Well, but teams beware, with caution to what it could, the implications to your business. But yes, as far as what the audience is interested in, there's a lot of overlap.
Cool. All right, let's move on, guys. I want to do one more story before we get to our YouGov Insight segment, because we do have data from YouGov this week, which will be fun to go through. And I want to talk about games, specifically some things that have been said about a couple of games this week. And Modern Warfare 2, this one was interesting. And then something Phil Spencer said sort of somewhat related to this. But the article here about Modern Warfare 2 was Modern Warfare 2 called not a video game, but a money-making algorithm. So this is a bunch of streamers and influencers basically complaining, including a content creator named Tyler Wildcat Wine. He says, I'm woke to this Matrix, man. I'm breaking out. I need video games with some substance, not data-driven engagement, optimized cash suckers. Every video game becoming a live service capable of taking your money 24/7 is ruining gaming. So, he goes on to talk about how basically Modern Warfare 2 has created this grind to keep you in the game, to unlock weapons that are better than the weapons you start with, and you have to grind to sort of have any kind of competitive standing in the game. And there are people who think that that Modern Warfare 2 is a little bit just of an algorithm. I want to put this next to a story which I'm tying 2 things together, but it's God of War that was in the news because it was the biggest launch in the franchise's history. So the new God of War Ragnarok got off to a huge start. This is data in the UK in terms of sales, but 55% of PS5 console sales this week were part of a God of War hardware bundle. So it's driving hardware sales. The game is selling incredibly well. This is like single player, story driven. You buy a boxed copy of the game. I'm putting these 2 stories next to each other because I'm curious, are we seeing I'm sensing a little bit of a reversal or some pushback against what has become maybe an industry norm gone too far? And I'm curious if you guys feel this way, right? Where the pushback against Modern Warfare 2, which was very anticipated, hotly hyped, and people were excited for this remake, and now the complaint is you've just turned it into this grind for to suck out as much cash as possible. And then on the other hand, the flip side, you have God of War. I don't even know how many in the series there have been, like 6 or 7 of them. Single player, story driven. You pay $60 or $70, and it's a hit. In the same way Elden Ring was a hit. Again, sort of these story driven, more single player-esque kind of games seeming to draw less criticism. Sorry for the long-winded intro here, but I'm curious what you guys think of this.
So I think I agree, but I don't know that I would characterize it as a new trend. It feels like every time, I guess what I'm trying to say is there's a reason why people are going towards the formulaic live service, kind of like pay to win slot machine type model, is because it is the lowest risk, highest reward. Now, there's always 1 or 2 games a year that are like great games that are $60 that don't do microtransactions that end up selling a lot of copies. Like, you had Red Dead, you had like Spider-Man. Like every year there's a couple that we could point to, and it's like, oh, AAA game, it's back. Like the single player game, like this is it. This proves that you can do it. But having said that, until we start seeing, and every year, a new Call of Duty comes out, and one of these, it's like, oh, this game pay to win. This game's, too formulaic. It's the same game every year. Until people stop buying that one and that stops working, it's going to still be the dominant like meta strategy for these businesses. So yeah, I mean, I guess I agree.
If you don't
with you,
think
but we
there's
could have done this
backlash,
story in
you don't think-
2018, and it would have been the same story.
Okay, but like I often see industries, even I don't want to go down this rabbit hole. Even politics follow these similar pendulums, right? Like you go to one extreme too far, and there's pushback, and it pushes it to the other extreme, and that's too far, and then and you get sort of this swinging back and forth. And I feel like we're seeing something similar with business models in gaming. And you're right. Maybe if we had done this story in 2018, it would have been the same story. But do you not see this pendulum sort of happening in the industry?
I mean, I think the biggest studios, they have both. I think you have these kind of big totem annual, or sometimes now twice annual influxes of cash, because that people are going to come back and they're going to buy that next release of it. You have the audience of gamers who want something that they can play for free and accept that maybe they're not even going to get the full experience that they would if they paid for more, but hey, at least they can play what they can play for free. Like, that's valuable to some people. That's not who the developer is counting on to make their money, but there is a benefit there to the right audience. And then I think other studios prioritize, like, no, we want to make a big story-based, beautiful game that is, just a fun experience, and not necessarily trying to monetize it in every way they could. But the big studios, they have all the above, and that's not going away. Like, they're gonna kind of keep all models. I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, so none of you think COD's going to change, right? None of you think COD next year will be totally different. They're going to apologize and see the error of their ways and move to a different business model. You think it continues to push in this direction of sort of an algorithm?
Yeah, I mean, not unless they see their player base going somewhere else.
Yeah, and it's not clear that it has been, right? Like, it's pretty so far. COD has been the new COD has been a success. Matt says it's not surprising that these story-driven single-player games are succeeding. People usually want to play video games to isolate/escape from the outside world. It's a good point, Matt. Agreed.
We say that all the time on the
exactly
show.
How many?
Sorry, Ben. Yeah, we say that all the time on the show, that games are missing these great story narratives and that we need more of them, right? That's what really captures audiences. Also, guys, I just want to jump in. I kind of take issue with this proclamation as some deep insight that gamings are an algorithm, right? Like, kind of everything is these days. Look at movies. Movies are not these creative masterpieces that they once were. It's okay, let's cast this actor and this actor and this actress because we're going to hit X, Y, and Z demographic, throw them together. This is nothing really new. This is kind of the business, is how do you appeal to a lot of people? How do you make a lot of money? Obviously, there are some outliers which are true art, whether in gaming, music, or anything else, but that's kind of how these industries are formed, and kind of how these companies are being so successful, is because they specifically create these products that cater to those people. And so long as the products are still fun and to some degree, I don't see that changing.
Harder Barbecue says it's not a new trend. War Games Inc. have been doing it for a while, but they're even more predatory. Yeah, I mean, to Jimmy's point, I think Hardware Barbecue, you're agreeing with Jimmy here, which is, the games as algorithms to extract dollars is not a new thing. Matt says overcoming a tough level in God of War that had given you fits for a long time does make you feel good. Yeah, in some ways that makes even games like Elden Ring and God of War also somewhat of algorithms, right? To figure out how to give you the next the next dopamine sort of hit, so you keep playing or you keep right. Like in some ways it's all manipulating human psychology. Christian says, I'll piggyback off of Matt. I'm tired of toxic, sweaty multiplayer lobbies. Christian, then don't play multiplayer games, I guess, because with SBMM, this is just the reality. All right, guys, that I want to touch on this. As everyone knows, this live stream is very generously sponsored by YouGov, and we have Ben here today, and so we take advantage to cover some interesting research that Ben brings. And we have a new study from you guys, Ben, right, which I'm going to bring up here. And I know you wanted to hit on some specific slide, so I'm going to share this.
And while you pull it up, I'll just this is just another fun stat. Among gamers, the top 3 reasons for gaming: number 1, 70%, it's to relax and wind down. 59% is to pass the time, and 43% is to escape from reality for a while. And it's actually a good transition to what we're going to talk about here. This isn't a study per se, but more of a way of thinking that YouGov wants to put out into the world. This is a kind of a framework that we've developed using our profiles data to help advertisers or anyone who, just like wants to tap into or just understand where they fit as a brand or as any company that has a message they want to get out to gamers, what the right channel is for them. So if you can just kind of scroll through this slowly and I'll talk over it. We don't need to go through. Pause here. So there are a lot of different ways that we define gaming these days, right? Like gaming is different. It 5 years ago, it was different. 10 years ago, it was just a thing that people did. You could either do it offline or online. You talk about it with your friends. Maybe you read IGN magazine, or you have some other media outlets that talk about gaming. And for some, it was a lifestyle. But now we all know it's like permeated into pop culture, and it's like it's right up there with. I saw another stat earlier this afternoon, looking at among teens what their top career aspirations are, and below the option for other, like the first option was to be an influencer, game streamer, or vlogger. Above professional sports player, above actor, actress, like all the things, above astronaut and doctor, like all the things that when we were kids, that's what we aspired to. So say that what that will about society. I'm not going to go there, but the point being, gaming is no longer, it's not this monolithic thing. It's something that needs to be understood in compartmentalized ways and as a collection of different niche audiences. So we've at YouGov, using variables that we are tracking every day around the world within our profile surveys, have started with a basic framework for advertisers to think about. And that's, people who are esports fans versus gamers. And then within that, people who watch streamers too. So we kind of have this people who are playing games and who are esports fans, people who are only gaming, people who are just none of the above, and then people who are only watching games, whether it's esports or other types of game streams. Of course, within all of these, we can drill much further into types of games you're streaming, types of games you're playing, et cetera, and so on. So you can go a bit further.
Yeah, I'll just add, Ben, for the people who listen to this, because so many of you guys listen to this after the fact, it's a 2x2 matrix, and I think it's interesting how to break sort of the esports versus gaming thing down, where you have people who watch only, or people who game only, and then you have the intersections of the two, right? Where you're an esports fan and you game, or you're not an esports fan and you don't game. So it's a 2x2 matrix for those who are listening.
Yeah, and there is no, all good, thanks, man. And there is there are population sizes associated with this. So we see that the game, it's all adults 18 plus. So put that out there. So not including teens, but we have about a third of the U.S. population who are only gamers, and that's about a population size of around 86 million adults. And then, overall, if we look at kind of the full gaming engaged cohort, it's 45% of the United States. So that's either they're playing, they're watching, or both. If we were to filter all this by, even under 44, that's a large majority of the audience. This is, again, considering everyone.
Ben, I just want to jump in here because I think the stat here that's most surprising to me, and I'm curious what you guys think, is the watch only stat. Because I was always curious about this demographic, right? Or this segment of this group, which was people who watch esports, right? They're interested in esports, but they don't play video games, or they play so little it falls under your 1 hour a week threshold, right?
Yeah.
8 million people in the US is a lot of watch only. That's a lot.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think, candidly, I'm like, I feel bad to admit this to this audience, but that's where I am most weeks. I don't, I don't have hours to play games all the time. So I watch my favorite streamers. I will watch kind of highlights from the big tournaments, particularly that my clients are playing in. But it's not every week that I get to turn my PlayStation on. And I mean, maybe mobile gaming here and there, but yeah, so that would be my thought there.
Cool.
And then we just kind of go into profiling all of these, going to that kind of, we were talking about betting and gambling earlier. Very similar stat to what I pulled a few minutes ago, but about 2/3 of the gaming and esports fan audience are interested in gaming, compared to 23% of average Americans. I feel a bit like we're repeating things that have already been said and are known, from what I've shared in the podcast and what YouGov puts out there in general. But generally, we see high interest in gambling and crypto, very heavy leaning male when we're focusing on the esports segment. And a lot of them, play games competitively themselves. And then, we can't discount the strong overlap between esports and traditional sports again. So we highlight here that 1/3 of this group watch or follow basketball, compared to 20% of Gen Pop.
But there's a better overlap between gaming and betting and gaming and crypto than there is gaming and basketball, which I think is
notable.
Maybe that's just interesting to in my brain. Jeff, sorry, go ahead.
No, I think that's a very notable point. It is interesting. I was curious on the betting and gambling, whether there was any follow-up question. Do we assume they mean betting on esports, or I guess in theory the question is broad enough where it could be betting on other things. But it would be interesting to know specifically to esports betting as well.
Yeah, this particular question is just I do want to see if we have a betting on esports variable. I'll follow up on there with that. I don't know that we specifically have betting on gaming or esports yet. These are, again, the kind of the top leagues that people are interested in. Call of Duty League, although we don't talk about it much on this show or just kind of in general, it always pops out at the top here when you ask people kind of what the leagues and events they follow or interest. Now, I think there's maybe something that could be said there, and I don't know if you can just go down a little further, Paul. I want to see if there's a citation at the bottom. There's not. This when we start to get into the more diehard esports fan groups, the top games that they follow, the rank changes. League of Legends bumps up a lot as you'd expect, and it really hit just a lot of the Riot titles, if I'm being honest.
The Call of Duty thing makes sense. I mean,
yep.
It's Call of Duty again has a fan base that probably unrivaled, right? And just in terms of ease of following it, a shooter is always going to be easier than a MOBA for the most part.
Yeah. And we dive a little bit here into kind of sources for finding about new games. And again, the point of these slides are really just to give a little taste of these different gaming cohorts we've identified with the data. And I also want to emphasis again that this is kind of very high level. We can get much deeper. But we can also look at much more about who they are outside of gaming and sports and sponsorship. But so we have some things here about like source information for new games and types of sponsorship they notice. And then no surprise here, but like this audience, they're a lot more kind of technologically forward thinking and tend to be early adopters of technology compared to Gen Pop.
The type of sponsorship noticed, I noticed there was nothing around changing the name of your team.
No, they're not. But the top one here for the listeners is sponsor of user-generated content like YouTube video or podcasts. So that, again, not surprising, but definitely something that resonates with this group.
And the other thing I thought, again, that confirms what everyone, I think, believes anecdotally in the industry now is when people are talking about sources of information for new games, gaming personalities ranks number 2, 44%, right? Like people are, this is how I find about, I'm watching Twitch, I'm watching people play the new games. That's where I'm going to get an opinion just more than anywhere else, really.
Yeah. And actually just one more thing on the last one. Attitudes around technology. I think in the future, AI will help humans in most of our daily tasks. 80% of this audience agrees to that statement. Coming out of GamesBeat 2 weeks ago, and even just some conversations I had this week, AI, and right now it's like AI generated imaging and video is kind of, I think, the most practical and tangible way that creators and the audience of creators are able to feel AI in their lives. But it's coming. Future's coming.
Yep.
All right.
So game only group. Sorry.
Yeah. So this is the only game group we see. So not esports fans. We notice there's a lot less men, so a lot more women who are gaming, but not necessarily following esports. They index toward action and adventure style games. I probably look at this and see like they probably tend to be more like PlayStation console owners than Xbox. A lot more like they say they prefer console gaming over PC and other forms of gaming. And they feel, this audience feels like crypto should be regulated more. So
the ones who don't watch esports, interesting enough, are the flip, like the corollary here is that they're more skeptical of crypto, right? But I think we can conclude that, because if they think it should be regulated more, it means they think maybe it's a bit more suspicious, which is interesting.
I mean, it's pretty in line with Gen Pop, but I think bringing our whole conversation full circle, right? There's something about esports and crypto, like those two things. For some reason, there is a connection in those audiences. It's kind of how they game. These are so different. So the game only group, they are maybe a little bit less out there seeking new games on their own. The top source for them to get new games is from their friends. And again, we consider anyone who games more than an hour a week. So if we tighten this up to over 5 hours a week, that's a different audience. But we really want to look big picture here. And the advertising channels here are pretty much in touch with general population, because this is a pretty large population. And that's kind of the highlights there. Just again, wanted to call out on all this, that hopefully some interesting takeaways for some folks. And there's probably a million different ways we could drill in deeper to these audiences and more about them and subsets within it.
Yeah, I'm going to put the link in the chat, guys, for yougov.com/BOE. I want everyone to go there. We'll try and get this up there, hopefully, Ben, because I think so much of it is just like basic data that everyone looking at the space should probably understand. So much of this is like really the core basics of this segment. And so I appreciate you bringing it, and everyone should go check out yougov.com/BOE. I put the link in all the chats that we can, but feel free to reach out to Ben or to any of us if you have more questions on this.
Yeah,
if you're looking for specific data for a project, for something you're doing, for you are interested in this gaming market and you're thinking about going in for the first time. It's the kind of thing you want to go in with really solid data to be able to make good decisions. So Ben, thank you as always. And go check out yougov.com/BOE, guys. We'll put all of this there, including other YouGov Insight segments that we've done with Ben. So if you like this, you can find more of that there. All right, guys, let's switch gears here. Can we talk about Game Pass? Because we talked about it a couple of weeks ago, I think, and Phil Spencer had come out with some numbers around Game Pass. But then we had a leak this week around Apple Arcade, which I thought was interesting. And the headline here was very clickbaity. It says, Apple Arcade may be the most popular game subscription, not PS Plus or Game Pass. So the way these figures were released was figures provided by Football Manager developer Sports Interactive Games. And what they're showing is that Apple Arcade subscribers dwarf other services. So Game Pass at 25 million plus is what they say here. Switch Online at 36 million plus. PS Plus, like PlayStation Plus, at 45.4 million. And Apple Arcade at about, it says, at least 100 million subscribers. Is anyone surprised at these numbers? Because we've always talked about Game Pass as sort of the monster successful service. First of all, I was surprised PS Plus and Switch Online have more. And second of all, Apple Arcade with 100 million. Now, Apple Arcade's included like in a bunch of in the Apple One or whatever they call it, like pack that Apple sells of their services that includes like storage and Apple Music and all these kinds of things. But is anyone surprised at these numbers?
I think you just answered your own question there. I think that there is a 0% chance that 100 million people have, signed up for Apple Arcade and are actively paying for Apple Arcade. I bet there's not even 1 million people that fit that category. But to your point, if it's bundled in with other stuff, and I actually suspect that's similar for PlayStation Plus. Switch Online, I think, is a lot cheaper potentially. But yes, I think to your point, it does change. It is narratively surprising. I
mean, it can't be a million,
but very
like it can't be like 1%. You're telling me 99% just don't know they have it?
I mean, I guess I have a question about like it's something you have to pay for, right? Like it's an additional subscription service, and so I guess
it's bundled in. I guess it might be part of. So, like it's like, hey, if you subscribe to this,
it's bundled with Apple One, which is like you get Apple Music, you get Apple Arcade, you get extra storage, iCloud storage for your phone, and Apple One can be shared with like 5 family members. Like this is the $29.99 a month sort of big push that Apple made around services.
Okay, I guess I don't have that, but yeah, I'm skeptical of this number.
The 100 million number?
Yeah. And this is that US? Is that global?
I think this is global. Yeah, this is global. I mean, when you think that there are, I don't even know how many iPhones in the wild now, like at least 1 billion, right? Maybe 1.5 billion iPhones. Doesn't seem like, call it 5 to 10% penetration in terms of this service.
Sure.
Doesn't seem crazy. I don't know. These numbers aren't broken out, I don't think. That's the problem, right? Like, I don't think Apple publishes those numbers broken out specifically. They just sort of publish the services revenue.
Yeah.
But I think it's interesting that Game Pass gets all the attention. Jimmy, I don't know if you had thoughts.
It draws my attention, or it reminds me of a story from Phil Spencer this week where he said if Game Pass can't compete on mobile, we're done for, right? That's kind of
why are you doing my next story?
Hey, perfect. No, bring it up because it's a perfect transition.
All right, do you want to host the show?
And here's our next story, boys and girls. Phil Spencer says the Xbox business will become untenable if it remains irrelevant on mobile. And that's exactly, I mean, that's why you have these two back-to-back, right, Paul? Because I think that shows how strong Apple Arcade is. I totally agree with Ben and Jeff, though. Like, I don't know these numbers. How do you make sense of these numbers? I think also what it goes to show is your boys and girls, your mom or dad are probably gaming a little bit more on their phones than you think they are. I know my mom spends a ton on like solitaire and other boring to me games, but that kind of counts, right? That's all part of these stats that we're drawing up here.
Totally. But I doubt people have arcade. What is it? Apple Arcade to play solitaire. Like you can download solitaire as your, a free to download solitaire, app, and maybe you can pay $2 to not watch the ads in the middle of it. But most of those players, they just want to play solitaire. They don't mind watching the 2-minute ad.
I think what it is, Ben, and again, sticking with solitaire, you can unlock certain weekly challenges, gamification rewards, as well as online leaderboards that make it a little more competitive. But I totally agree with you that most of them are just going to remove the ads. I also think part of it is just the free trial, right? Like they just throw it on your phone. It's free for X months, and we're counting that now and force inflating our number.
Yeah, that's an excellent point, Jimmy. Like Apple Arcade's included with like if you buy like a pair of AirPods, you get like 3 free months of Apple Arcade, right? Like they bundle it with basically everything. So how much of that 100 million is that? We don't know. But
yeah,
the reason I put these two stories back to back is I've been saying for a while that console's in trouble, right? Because it gets squeezed. It's in the middle. PC will always be the high end. Mobile will always be the casual. Console sort of becomes no man's land as mobile gets better and PCs sort of walk away with the high end, right? The gap between console and PC gets bigger, and the gap between mobile and console gets smaller. And so consoles inevitably, in my mind, get squeezed. So I think he's right to be thinking about this. And then maybe he saw that 100 million number next to Game Pass sort of way on the left and said, man, this is a problem. But I think the answer is not for Game Pass to pivot to mobile, because what Apple has done, I think, so successfully is content and hardware coming together, right? Like they understand the casual user, I think, better than anyone else, which is make it dead simple. It's on hardware you own. It's an easy subscription. Make fun little casual games that people will play. This is not about making a Call of Duty mobile exclusive, because I think, again, there's this disconnect between trying to appeal to hardcore users on a platform that is inherently casual.
I mean, it's inherently now. Does that change in time? Like, does Xbox? I mean, I think Xbox definitely needs to make mobile part of their long-term strategy.
But with no hardware, can they, Ben? Is the question.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, when does at what point does the mobile experience become? I don't have a backbone. Like I've never played with one. If that's like a good experience, I'm not sure. But yeah, there seems to just be limitations to mobile but that technology could solve, like battery life and connectivity wherever you are in the world or wherever you want to be. And we have cloud computing now and space up there, so that's kind of not as much of an issue anymore. But I don't know.
I want to put a third story back to back here, because I think this one ties in as well. And the headline here was Apple's AR VR headset will reportedly include a 3D video service and its own metaverse. So they're thinking this is going to be called Reality. That's the branding. It'll reportedly cost $2,000 to $3,000. I don't know if it was in this article, but I had read another article where basically they were saying the reason it's delayed is because of all the time Apple is spending on content, whether it's sports or music, or in this case, video and metaverse and like games. Supposedly they are spending a lot of time building content. Apple's making its own take on the metaverse, and that all of this will be integrated with their hardware. Does this not feel a little bit like the same, right? And what Apple has done well in terms of convergence of hardware and content / gaming, and therefore
this exciting
has a higher success, right, than an Oculus maybe, or a Meta Quest now, or whatever they're calling it.
Yeah, I hadn't.
Yeah, I mean, I think marrying the software and the hardware is a good idea, and that's always something Apple, I think, has done, as you noted earlier, very well. So We'll see. Maybe maybe it does give them a bit of an advantage. They've always been kind of the wild card. I feel like here in this metaverse race. I mean, Facebook kind of stepped out really early, but I think they have so many PR problems that it just doesn't feel like anyone wants. It's just not cool anymore as a brand. Apple still is cool. Apple makes great hardware. Hardware is kind of the gateway to the metaverse, but you also need the software. So I do think it's smart not to just launch a $3,000 piece of hardware or whatever the cost you said was without anything to actually do in the metaverse.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Christian says, not surprised by this. Everyone has an iPhone or an Apple product. Yeah, there's like 1.5 billion iPhones or whatever the number is now. Matt says, these numbers are definitely surprising. I can't name a single person that uses this subscription service. So I have it because I have the Apple One thing, and I think I've probably downloaded a game at some point in the 2 or 3 years that Apple Arcade has that I've had it, but I'm not a mobile gamer. So there you go, Matt. Now you know one person that has this service. And Matt says, maybe I'm ignorant as a North American, but I just don't know anyone who uses Apple Arcade. I still stick to they should have brought Apple Arcade. They should have bought GameStop and brought Apple Arcade to the physical stores and made it actual arcades. I still think that was the play. And no one listened to me.
Well, the Apple stores we could see an arcade section in the Apple stores in the near future.
You could. They should do that, I think. Guys, I just have one last story here before we wrap up. And curious what you guys think of this. This is Fnatic in the news because we talked about esports teams. So let's sort of begin and end with esports teams. And in this case, it's not a crypto sponsor. In this case, they're launching their own music label. So this is esports brand Fnatic launching their own music label. And, they're trying to expand their business according to the article, right? Merchandise, entertainment, music. So they're launching their own label called Fnatic Music and released a compilation album of lo-fi hip hop called Fnatic Island Volume 1. Features more than 40 artists and includes tracks that specifically mention some of Fnatic's team members and influencers. There's even a 24/7 YouTube stream of the music because it's lo-fi hip hop. And the artists involved will get 60% of the royalties from the project. What do you guys think of Fnatic getting into music? Are they a big enough esports brand to make this a success? Is music, one of the more obvious pivots here or alternative revenue streams? Jimmy, you have experience in the music business.
I haven't listened to Fnatic's distribution yet, but this just kind of screams any NBA or NFL player that comes out with a rap album because they have money, they have an interest in something else. I don't know if this is any good.
Legitimately good, okay? I don't care what you say.
Yeah, that one song. No, I don't want to listen to it. I hope it does well. It's cool for them to express their creative outlets. I think this one is a no-brainer because there's all these music issues with streaming that they can just stream their own stuff and get paid for it and have zero issues there. But whether or not it's actually good music is that's kind of the lens I'm looking at it through. And, just because you're talented in one lane doesn't mean you're talented in another. They very well could be, and a lot of people certainly are, but it's very hard, I think, to be that talented and that successful or that skilled at these things. So I'm not holding my breath on this one. I don't know if it's going to perform that well, but it is, like I said, clever for them to use their own music in their streams. So that's a no-brainer, even if it's just instrumentals, right? Like that's something that I would look into.
Instrumentals.
Sorry, Ben, go ahead.
I was gonna say instrumentals make great money because you put that on the background and it's just on for 40 hours or whatever you want it to be. Like there's a band that I'm really into called Wolfpack, and they as kind of a blowback to Spotify and all the royalties they take off, they created an album called Sleepify or something like that, and it was silence. It was nothing. And so then all of Wolfpack's fans went and played the track while they were sleeping, and Wolfpack made off with a bunch of money in royalties from that. Like
that's super clever.
It's kind of similar. It could be.
I don't think you can ignore maybe I had a different perception of Fnatic. To me, Fnatic was like, I think they had success in League and Fortnite and maybe at one point in history CS:GO even. And I always felt it was more of a competitive focused org, because the one thing that they did maybe earlier than almost any other esports team was they did like gaming accessories. They did keyboards, I think, primarily. I'm trying to think if they did anything else, but keyboards for sure. They had Fnatic branded keyboards, like 60% gaming keyboards, basically, that were actually quite good. That was a reasonably good gaming product. And it felt sort of that was more in line with sort of the competitive focus of the team, of the org. The lo-fi hip hop, again, I'm not sure if that hurts the brand, or is it just like an easy cash grab because people are going to play music in the background. Jeff, I don't know if you have any final thoughts on this.
I do not listen to any music. I trust Jimmy's opinion on this. No, I'm not a big music guy, so I don't know. Maybe they're good. Is it like if they get Taylor Swift in there, then I'll be interested.
You honestly didn't know that was an answer. There are people that don't listen to music.
I know.
I rarely listen to music.
Can help you out, man.
Yeah.
I'd say if I could add one last thing here, I think that ultimately, like Fnatic, like FaZe, and all the rest, like the business is content, and if they have creators who want to, are also musicians, it makes sense for them to help build their audience, to build the overall Fnatic audience. And I don't, it could be wrong. We'll be interested to see how this grows. Like, I don't see this becoming a main channel for Fnatic to monetize, but as a way to kind of let other influencers, explore their creativity and build their loyalty long term, and maybe sign up some other micro influencers to round out their assets.
Yeah, and it feels like relatively low lift, right? Like this is not something that requires huge major amounts of investment. I mean, they put out one album and a YouTube channel. So yeah, it's interesting. It's always interesting to see esports orgs branching out, figuring out other ways to build fan base, build community, monetize. So I thought the story was interesting. Guys, that wraps up this week's episode. Big thank you, Ben, to you for bringing all the YouGov insights this week. Go check out yougov.com/BOE, guys, and make sure to reach out to Ben or to any of us if you want to be talking to YouGov about data, about accessing this gaming audience in a smart way. Also, a reminder: don't forget to subscribe to Business of Esports everywhere, on Instagram, on YouTube, on TikTok, on LinkedIn, on Twitter. I know I'm forgetting something, Jimmy, but on every platform, we put out all kinds of different content. So you should be subscribed everywhere. Don't forget, we do this live stream every Wednesday, 2:30 p.m. Eastern time. Bring your friends, bring your coworkers. I know so many of you listen to this after the fact, but it's so much more fun live. And the most important thing, guys, don't forget, the future is fun. We'll see you next week.
Thanks, guys.